And there's others of us that actually have what you might call a religious background, and we're still fairly straight arrows, and we're relatively moral and upstanding, and if somebody asks you what your beliefs are, you can give the right answers, and you can say, well, I'm a human being, and I'm weak, and I'm needy, but Jesus died for me, and you give all the right answers, and yet you're like Jonah too. Because you know that by and large, God to you is more of an idea and a concept than a person. And what happened to Jonah here may have already happened to you or may be about to happen to you. Here was a man who had served God, been religious for years, but when the test came, the doctrine of God with which he had been familiar for years was of no help to him. Why? Because he had never actually experienced the reality of God. He froze, he slid, he fell badly. And so a lot of us can relate to Jonah from that angle too. No matter who you are, you can relate well to him. And so here's what we're going to look at today. The essence of sin is running from God. And I might as well start off by saying the first step of Christianity, the first step in any relationship to God at all, is to admit that you have run away from God, and that even now, to some degree, everybody in this room is running from God. It's our nature to run from God. Until you're willing to admit that, you can't get anywhere. That's the first step. You have to recognize and admit that you have run from Him, and that you've tried to get away from Him. And I would say this: the most profound kind of self-knowledge you can know is the particular strategies that you have for running and hiding from God. Every one of us in this room have got those strategies. Every one of us has a unique pattern to it. Look at Genesis. What are we told in Genesis? As soon as Adam and Eve sinned, what's the first thing they did? As soon as they reached out and ate the fruit, as soon as they disobeyed God, what's the first thing they did? They hid. And every one of us has the same deep down inherent nature. We run and we hide, and if you don't see that, you don't know yourself. Here's the first step of Christianity. If you want to have a relationship with God, you must not primarily see yourself as a self-sufficient person. Beyond that, you must not primarily even see yourself as basically a hurting, or essentially a hurting, suffering person. You must see yourself primarily as a fugitive. Someone who's running from God, and until you see that, you cannot take the first steps toward Him. My wife will tell you that when I'm lost or when I can't find something in a grocery store, I will not ask anybody where it is. I will not ask anybody where I am. And therefore, I can tell you from first-hand experience, nobody is as hopelessly lost as the man who won't admit that he's hopelessly lost. Don't you see? That makes sense. Unless you see that you run from God, unless everybody in this room will be willing to say, I have run from God, I am running from God, even now, this week, I can see the patterns in my life. Until you're willing to admit that, you can't move on. And not only that, the sermon won't help you much. But I hope that you will be open, at least, to seeing how the Bible here teaches us what it means to run from God and how that can be remedied.